I'm creating a retro-themed platformer game and I'm heavily inspired by the game music in the 90s. Turrican, especially Turrican 2, with a soundtrack by an all-time music-making legend, Chris Hulsbeck, was one of my favorites. And I spent more time in the menu listening to the music on repeat than actually playing the game. I want to honor that era of gaming and demo scene by influencing the gameplay, graphics, and now music with elements from that period. I'm having an absolute blast creating this game. I'm going for cyan and magenta colors for logo and a lot of the in-game graphics. A simple, action-packed platformer experience, and now the beginning of a soundtrack made in modern music software but packed with melodies and sounds from the SID chip, chiptune, and tracked mod music era. I will be making a complete soundtrack for Ultranova that will be available separately outside the game. If you don't make it to the final level, you'll still be able to listen to the music in the soundtrack if that's something you're into. I've had some requests in the comments to show how I made this track. So here's a recap. I recorded the screen as I composed the track, and now I can show segments of that and add some context to what my thoughts were. There are some very important pieces of advice in this video if you're making music, which also applies to anything in game development, so don't miss out on those. Here's a clip of the game with the first piece of music, and then I'll go through the creation process. I started up Studio One by Presonus, which is my DAW of choice these days. I used to use Cubase, and before that I used Fast Tracker 2, but now I feel that Studio One suits me best and it has a modern UI. It's been over a year since I made music or even started this software, so I was feeling rusty but inspired. I recently bought a bunch of expansions for a soft synth called Nexus by ReFX, and in this track I ended up using exclusively that VSTi instrument with Synthwave, analog and chip expansions that I purchased on the Christmas sale. I usually start with the bass, so I browsed through some of the bass sounds in the analog expansion packs, but I ended up going for a smooth synth bass that I liked in the Synthwave expansion. I sold my MIDI keyboards when I moved from Sweden to Australia last year, so I have to manually input all the notes in the piano roll view. To be honest, I do that most of the time anyway, but the keyboard was nice to test out chords and lead melodies. But now I've got no choice. I remember the bass line I use for this style of music, so I put that in. One bass note on C on every beat, and then 2 quick ones, 1 octave up before the next beat. And I repeat that 4 times per bar. Then I added another instance of Nexus and went for a Synthwave drum preset. It has drums that suit Synthwave and space synth music in one single instrument, and I prefer to make music rather than gathering samples, so it's pretty handy. When I was happy with the bass line and the basic drums, I picked another lead instrument and put together a series of chords to suit the style. And like with everything I do, there's a lot of trial and error. I have no real knowledge about music theory. I don't even know the names of most stuff. I don't know major and minor chords, and I can hardly read notes. I don't know anything like that. But what I do know is when my ears hear something they like. But after a while, I had a sequence that I was happy with. I believe it goes from C down to G sharp, down to F, and then up to A sharp. And like I said, I don't know the names of those unless I count from C like I did now, just so I could tell you. I just know that it sounds pretty good together in that sequence. Then I added a bell-like sound to play on every other bar. And then it was time to make some sort of a lead. I picked a synthy lead sound and I began to play on repeat and draw in notes while listening to what it sounded like at the same time. And here comes the first big tip from me that I've said in my modeling videos too. Allow it to look, and in this case, sound horrible, and don't give up. As I was drawing these notes, my ears and brain were begging me to Alt F4 in shame. But then I listened to it and looked where it felt like it sounded off, and I adjusted it until it didn't sound off anymore. Now I know that doing things by ear is not for everyone, then you have the option to study music theory instead. But in the end, even if you study it, I think you have to be able to determine if it sounds good or not anyway, so I just skipped the study step. I felt that I needed more rhythmic elements to get it sound fast-paced. I found a snappy bass-like sound, and I followed the bass line with it. Then I needed to add some more drums. I added another kick, a snare on every other beat, and then a hi-hat line. The nice thing with music is sometimes you only need to create one beat or one bar worth of notes, and then you can copy those a lot. Time for another lead now. I often put a few notes down and I go through the instrument presets until one catches my ear. This lead, Satellite Lead, really caught my attention, so I continued with that and put a few more notes down for the sequence. Some sounded good, some sounded awful, but after a while I had 8 bars worth of notes that I felt worked with the bass line and chords. I looked at a video from my game to see if it matched the game, and it feels nice, and it's nice to only have to answer to myself. If I like it, well, that's good enough. I'm happy with that. You might have picked up 2 new sounds now. One is this bell sound that plays every now and then, and it's replying to what the lead has just played. And then I've added a SID chip style lead instrument that I doubled with a satellite lead. This lead has portamento, which is one of the few techniques that I actually know the name of. With portamento, the note can glide from one note to another. By starting a note, either a note or 2 below the one that you actually want to play, and then you place the actual note that you want to play quickly above it, it will glide up to that note. This technique was extensively used in chip music, and I absolutely love it. The lead actually has another thing that I know the name of, and that's vibrato. I think that's how you say it, at least. But you might hear that at the end of the lead it vibrates when it's been playing for a while. In the trackers you used to have to use some hex values to achieve this effect, but a lot of the modern VST instruments and expansions build this into the instrument patch, so you'll save a lot of time on it. Now I had lots of bass, drums, chords, leads and fillers, so I zoomed out and copied blocks to extend the track, and in this process I ended up with a happy accident. The satellite lead was intended to play in sync with a chip lead, but I had added 1 beat worth of notes, so I misaligned them. This made the satellite lead play 1 beat behind the lead, but I like that effect. In the past I've actually done that intentionally, but in this case it was just a mistake. This is what it sounds like in sync. And this is what it sounds like when it's trailing by 1 beat. I think it has the effect that it's chasing the lead, sort of like a story. It's telling the lead, hey, I'm right behind you, let me catch up. Like a conversation between the two instruments. Philosophical. Yeah, very philosophical. Now that you've heard most of the elements that make up this track, but I'll run through them one by one. First, we have the bass line. Then we have the drums. And we have some synth chords. This chord is layered up with a chip-style sound on lower volume. And then there's a soft bell that plays a little scale. And then there's a soft lead of some sort. The same lead was copied with another preset, and I added an effect to make it pulsate a little bit. Then we have an additional filler bass line. And then to my favorite, the portamento gliding chip-style SID lead. And then the satellite lead, which plays an echoing version of the lead melody. Finally, we have this bell sound, and I've added that when the lead is slightly less busy. Again, it's like a conversation. The lead is saying something and the bell responds. That's how I like to think of it. Listen to it and ask yourself, does it sound good? Is anything off key? My goal is to please my ears. I know there's a ton of stuff that could have been done better. I'm breaking rules left and right, and I'm playing too many things at once. I'm not mixing things correctly, but I'm okay with that. My goal is to make music that I like, and hopefully that others will like, but not at the cost of having it consume me to the point where it won't get finished or released. I need to make at least 60 minutes, hopefully more than that, for the soundtrack of the platformer, and I also have to do the programming, 3D modeling, animation, game design, promotion, and everything else that you could possibly do for the game. This is a passionate hobby of mine, and I'm trying to balance that with full-time game development for Line War, as well as being a father, a husband, and I can only spend so much time on it. This track took me 3 hours and 30 minutes from start to finish. That's usually how long it takes me to make a track, but, and this is a big but, not mine. But 9 times out of 10 that I start to make a track, I ended up throwing it away after 30 minutes because it just doesn't gel. So I should truthfully add those 9 failed attempts to each successful one, and it's more like 10 hours then to complete the song. I hope this gave you an insight to my creative process and how I make the music. Hope you like it, and please consider wishlisting Ultranova on Steam. It would help me out a lot as we approach the release of the game. I'm trying to move as fast as I can and at the same time make videos about the development process so I can show all the sides of game development. Until next video, take care and I'll see you then. Bye for now.